In the quiet town of Maplewood, where the sun dipped low over the horizon and the air was thick with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass, lived a man named Thomas. He had spent the better part of his life building a home with his beloved wife, Evelyn. Their love had been a tapestry woven with laughter, shared dreams, and unwavering support. They had weathered storms together, from job losses to family tragedies, and had always emerged stronger. But on a fateful Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Thomas had just come home from a long day at the hardware store, exhausted yet satisfied with the work he had done. The sound of the garage door opening announced his arrival, but the house was eerily quiet. He called out for Evelyn, expecting her to greet him with her warm smile and a cup of tea, as was their custom. But the silence hung heavy in the air, and a gnawing feeling settled in his gut. He wandered through the house, his heart racing with anticipation and concern. It was then that he noticed the faint sound of laughter coming from their bedroom. It was a sound he had thought was reserved for them alone. Curiosity morphed into dread as he approached the door, which was ajar just enough for him to catch a glimpse inside. What he saw shattered his world in an instant. Evelyn was there, her laughter mingling with that of a man Thomas had never seen before. They were entwined in each other's arms, their faces lit with a joy that had once belonged solely to him. It was a sight that pierced him deeper than any blade, a betrayal that felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. The warmth of their shared life, the memories they had crafted together, seemed to dissolve in that single moment of revelation. Thomas stumbled back, his mind racing as he fought to process the scene before him. Anger surged through him, hot and suffocating, followed by an overwhelming wave of sorrow. How could she do this to him? How could the woman he had devoted his life to betray him so cruelly? The questions swirled in his mind like a tempest, but there was no easy answer. Instead of confronting them, a deep instinct for self-preservation kicked in. Thomas decided to leave the house, to gather his thoughts and plan his next move. He drove aimlessly through the streets of Maplewood, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with rage. He felt like a stranger in his own life, abandoned by the one person he thought would always stand by him. Days turned into a week, and the ache of betrayal settled into a dull throb in his chest. He watched as Evelyn went about her life, seemingly unaffected by the devastation she had wrought. It was during this time that something within him shifted. Instead of wallowing in despair, he felt a fire ignite, a desire for justice, a need to reclaim his dignity. Thomas began to gather information about the man who had stolen his wife's affection. He learned that his name was Mark, a charming but deceitful man who had a reputation for leaving a trail of broken hearts behind him. The more Thomas uncovered, the more his resolve hardened. He would not simply sit back and allow this betrayal to define him. He would take action. Over the following weeks, Thomas meticulously devised a plan. He would confront both Evelyn and Mark, but not in the way they expected. Instead of a scene filled with shouting and chaos, he would orchestrate a moment that would leave them both stunned. He envisioned a confrontation that would not only expose their betrayal, but would also allow him to reclaim his power, on a crisp fall evening, he invited both of them to the old Maplewood Diner, a place that held memories of happier times. As he sat at the booth, he could feel the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on him. When Evelyn and Mark arrived, their faces were masks of surprise and confusion. Thomas greeted them with a calm demeanor that concealed the storm brewing within him. "Thank you both for coming," he said, his voice steady. "I wanted to talk about something important." Evelyn looked nervous, her eyes darting between Thomas and Mark, who wore a smug grin, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Thomas took a deep breath, preparing to unveil the truth he had uncovered. Evidence of Mark's past, his manipulation, and the way he had preyed upon unsuspecting women, including Evelyn. As he laid out the facts before them, a palpable tension filled the air. He watched as realization dawned on Evelyn's face, the horror of her choices sinking in. Mark's bravado began to crumble, and for the first time, Thomas felt a sense of satisfaction. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his life and dignity. "I hope you both find what you're looking for," Thomas concluded, a bittersweet smile on his face. "But remember, every choice has consequences, and in the end, the truth always finds a way to surface." With that, he stood up and walked out of the diner, leaving them to grapple with the wreckage of their decisions. As Thomas stepped into the cool night air, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had confronted the betrayal head-on, and in doing so, he had taken back the power that had been so cruelly stripped from him. But this was not the end of his journey. The embers of his resolve still burned brightly, and he knew that he needed to ensure that this chapter of his life was closed for good. There were still loose ends to tie up, and he was determined to turn this painful experience into a lesson learned, not just for himself, but for others who might find themselves in similar situations. What he didn't realize was that the path to healing would lead him to unexpected allies and revelations, unfolding a story of redemption, strength, and the possibility of new beginnings. As Thomas stepped out of the diner, the cool night air washed over him, clearing his mind from the heaviness that had settled in his heart. It was a strange feeling, a blend of relief and lingering pain. He'd confronted the two people who had caused him so much heartache, yet the bitterness of betrayal still clung to him like a shadow. He walked slowly down the empty streets of Maplewood, the streetlights flickering above him like stars in the dark sky. And he began to reflect on his past with Evelyn. Their love story had been the kind that made friends and family envious. They met at a local charity event, both contributing their time to improve their community. Thomas, a humble schoolteacher, had always admired Evelyn's passion for helping others. Their connection blossomed quickly, and before long, they were inseparable. Years of shared dreams and laughter, but now all those memories felt tainted by the betrayal that had unfolded before him. In the days that followed, Thomas found himself a man on a mission. He knew he needed to reclaim his dignity and move forward. He began by bolstering his support system. He reached out to his oldest friend, Greg, who had always been like a brother to him. Greg had been there through thick and thin, and Thomas knew he could trust him to help navigate through this difficult time. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Greg's house, the sun setting in a blaze of oranges and purples, Thomas poured out his heart. "I feel lost, Greg. It's like my entire world has crumbled, and I don't know how to rebuild it." Greg nodded, his expression serious. "You're stronger than you think, buddy. This will be your moment to rise. You deserve better than this. You deserve to be happy again." He paused, considering his words. "Have you thought about what you really want now? Beyond the pain, what do you want for yourself?" That question struck a chord within Thomas. He had been so focused on the betrayal and the anger festering inside him that he hadn't considered what his future might look like. With renewed determination, he began to envision a life without Evelyn, one where he could pursue his passions, rediscover himself, and maybe even find love again. Thomas decided to take a proactive approach. He took up old hobbies he had neglected, such as painting and hiking. He joined a local book club, immersing himself in stories that took him to distant lands and alternate realities, providing a welcome escape. The more he engaged in activities that brought him joy, the more he felt the shackles of betrayal loosening. But Thomas was also determined to ensure that Mark, the man who had so callously disrupted his life, faced the consequences of his actions. During one of his hikes, he stumbled upon an old acquaintance, Lisa, a sharp-witted journalist who had a knack for uncovering the truth. Over a cup of coffee in a quaint cafe, he shared his story, and her eyes widened with intrigue. "Thomas, if you want to expose the truth about Mark, I can help you. He's been linked to other women in the past. It's just a matter of digging a little deeper," she said, her fingers tapping on her laptop as she took notes. Thomas felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps revealing Mark's history would not only serve justice, but also provide a sense of closure for him. They began to collaborate, researching and gathering evidence about Mark's past relationships, discovering a pattern of deception and heartbreak that echoed Thomas's experience. As they delved deeper into Mark's life, they uncovered stories from previous partners who had been left in emotional turmoil after their relationships ended. It became clear that Mark was a master manipulator, someone who preyed on the vulnerabilities of others. Each story they uncovered fueled Thomas's resolve. Meanwhile, Evelyn had reached out to Thomas several times, attempting to apologize and plead for forgiveness. But Thomas kept his distance, knowing that rekindling their relationship would only lead to more heartache. He didn't want to fall back into the same trap that had led to his betrayal. With Lisa's help, Thomas prepared to confront Mark again, this time armed with evidence. They organized a meeting at a local park, a place that once represented happiness for him. As the day approached, Thomas felt a mix of apprehension and determination. This was his chance to reclaim his narrative and ensure that Mark understood the pain he had caused. On the day of the confrontation, Thomas arrived early, pacing under the shade of a tall oak tree. He could see Mark approaching, his confident stride a stark contrast to the unease that churned in Thomas's stomach. But he reminded himself of his purpose. This was about justice, not vengeance. As Mark reached him, Thomas took a deep breath. "I know who you are, Mark. I've seen the devastation you leave behind. You think you can charm your way through life without consequences, but that ends today." He laid out the evidence, the stories of the women who had suffered at Mark's hands, each one a reminder of the pain that had been inflicted. Mark's bravado faltered as he realized that Thomas was not the broken man he had expected. "You don't know what you're talking about," he retorted, but the uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "I know enough," Thomas replied firmly. "You're not just a man who made a mistake. You're a pattern of hurt, and it's time someone held you accountable for that." The confrontation was intense, emotions running high as Thomas stood his ground. But as he walked away, feeling a sense of liberation wash over him, he knew this was not just about Mark anymore. It was about reclaiming his life and moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Thomas felt more like himself. He began to envision a future filled with possibilities rather than regrets. As he continued to share his experiences with Lisa, they nurtured a friendship that was grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Then, one evening, while attending a community event focused on local authors, Thomas found himself captivated by a woman named Claire. She spoke passionately about her love for storytelling, and for the first time in months, Thomas felt a spark of hope flicker in his heart. Perhaps there was still a chance for love, just not the kind he once envisioned with Evelyn. As he engaged with Claire, sharing laughter and stories, Thomas realized that healing was not only possible, but already unfolding. The journey of reclaiming his life was far from over. But he was no longer defined by his past. Instead, he was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. And so, as the sun set over Maplewood, casting golden rays over the town, Thomas felt the weight of betrayal slowly lifting. With each new day came the promise of renewal, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he was no longer just a victim of circumstance. He was a man reborn, ready to seize the life he truly deserved. As the autumn leaves painted the town of Maplewood in rich shades of amber and crimson, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. With each passing day, he was shedding the weight of his past. Lisa had become a constant presence, supporting him through the emotional aftershocks of his former life with Evelyn. Their friendship blossomed over shared laughter and deep conversations, and Thomas found solace in her company. She was not only a confidant, but also a partner in his quest for justice. One evening, while sipping coffee at their favorite cafe, Lisa brought up the idea of organizing a community awareness event. "You know, Thomas," she began, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, "what if we could warn other people about individuals like Mark? We could create a platform for those who've suffered because of him and others like him." The thought resonated with Thomas. He couldn't shake the memory of the pain he had endured, and he knew others needed a voice just like he had needed one. With Lisa's help, they began planning a local gathering aimed at raising awareness about emotional manipulation and betrayal in relationships. Flyers were distributed around town, and word spread quickly. The community was intrigued, and steadily, people began to express interest in sharing their stories. As the event approached, Thomas found himself filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. He had a purpose now, something beyond his own healing. The night before the event, he couldn't sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of what he would say. Eventually, he found solace in the pages of a book, losing himself in the words that spoke of resilience and courage. The day of the event arrived, and the Maplewood Community Center buzzed with anticipation. The room was filled with familiar faces and new ones alike, all coming together for a common cause. As Thomas stood at the front, he felt a surge of determination. He looked out at the crowd, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I stand before you as someone who has felt the sting of betrayal and the burden of heartbreak. But I also stand here as someone who believes in the power of community and healing." He shared his story, the pain of discovering Evelyn's infidelity, and his journey toward reclaiming his life. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling in. As he spoke, he noticed several faces in the crowd nodding in empathy, a few even shedding tears. It was clear that many could relate to his experience, and he felt a sense of solidarity wash over him. Lisa followed, sharing her own experiences as a journalist who had encountered countless stories of betrayal. She emphasized the importance of speaking out and supporting one another. Their combined narratives ignited a spark in the audience, encouraging others to step forward. As the evening unfolded, several individuals bravely shared their own stories of heartbreak and recovery. Each tale was unique, yet they all interwove into a tapestry of resilience, creating an atmosphere of camaraderie. Thomas realized that together, they were not just sharing pain, they were celebrating survival and the strength of the human spirit. After the event concluded, Thomas felt a shift within himself. He was no longer just a victim of betrayal. He was a beacon of hope for others. As people began to leave, several approached him, thanking him for his courage and sharing their appreciation for the event. One woman in particular caught his attention. Her name was Sarah, and she had a warmth about her that drew him in. "I never thought I would find the strength to talk about what happened to me," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "But hearing you and Lisa made me realize I'm not alone." Thomas nodded, feeling a connection with her. "We all have a story, and sharing it is part of the healing process," he replied, offering her a comforting smile. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah lingered, and they began to talk more. They shared laughs, exchanged stories of their journeys, and found comfort in each other's understanding. As they spoke, Thomas felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Days turned into weeks, and Thomas continued to foster his budding connection with Sarah. They explored the town together, visiting the local farmers market, hiking the trails around Maplewood, and enjoying quiet evenings filled with laughter and conversation. With each shared moment, Thomas found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, allowing himself to be vulnerable once again. However, in the back of his mind, the mission to expose Mark still lingered. Although Thomas had found ways to heal, he felt a nagging sense of injustice that he couldn't ignore. He and Lisa had gathered enough testimonies and evidence to create a powerful narrative about Mark's history of manipulation. It was time to take the final step and ensure that Mark would no longer hurt others. One afternoon, Thomas and Lisa met at a cafe to finalize the details of their exposé. "We have the stories we need, and we can compile them into an article that will really make an impact," Lisa said, her eyes shining with excitement. Thomas nodded, feeling a mix of determination and apprehension. "I want to make sure it's not just about revenge, but about awareness. If we can prevent even one person from going through what I did, it will be worth it." They spent hours refining their message, weaving together the accounts of those who had suffered at Mark's hands. When the article was published online, it quickly gained traction, shared widely across social media platforms. The response was overwhelming, with many people coming forward to share their own experiences and express their gratitude for bringing the issue to light. However, as the article spread, so did Mark's anger. He reached out to Thomas, demanding that he take it down. The confrontation that followed was heated, with Mark resorting to threats and manipulation. But Thomas stood firm, emboldened by the support of the community and the validation of his own journey. "Your time of hurting others is over, Mark," Thomas said, his voice steady. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone you've wronged. It's time for the truth to come out." With those words, Thomas felt a wave of liberation wash over him. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice, healing, and empowering others to reclaim their lives. The battle was far from over, but he knew he was not alone. He had his friends, his community, and a newfound purpose guiding him forward. As the days turned into months, Thomas continued to nurture his relationship with Sarah while also pursuing his mission for justice. They shared dreams and laughter, exploring the possibilities of a future together. Thomas found himself dreaming again, not just of revenge or reclaiming what was lost, but of building something beautiful, a life filled with love, laughter, and resilience. And with each step he took, he grew stronger, more confident, and more aware of the life he deserved. Maplewood had transformed from a place of heartbreak into a sanctuary of healing, friendship, and hope, a town where stories were shared, lessons were learned, and love always found a way to flourish. With the community rallying behind him, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. The event he had organized, titled Healing Hearts, was a resounding success, bringing together dozens of people who shared their stories of betrayal and resilience. The atmosphere was charged with empathy and understanding, and as Thomas spoke, he felt the weight of his past lifting. As he and Sarah explored this new connection, they spent evenings strolling through the local park, sharing laughter and dreams. Sarah's kindness and genuine interest in Thomas's journey helped him heal in ways he hadn't anticipated. They bonded over their love for music and art, often spending weekends visiting galleries and attending concerts, savoring the joy of rediscovering life. However, Mark was not easily deterred. He began to spread rumors about Thomas, attempting to tarnish his reputation in the community. But rather than retaliate with anger, Thomas remained steadfast. With Sarah and Lisa by his side, he decided to confront Mark publicly at the next town hall meeting. The night of the meeting, Thomas stood before an audience filled with supportive faces. he shared how Mark's actions had impacted his life. But instead of focusing solely on revenge, he emphasized the importance of healing and community support. He spoke passionately about how they could come together to create a safe space for those affected by betrayal, urging everyone to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation. As he spoke, he noticed the shift in the crowd. People began nodding in agreement, their expressions shifting from curiosity to solidarity. Even the mayor, who had initially been skeptical of Thomas's motives, began to see the importance of the issue at hand. Mark, seated at the back, squirmed as the truth unfolded. The community's support bolstered Thomas's confidence, and he knew he had turned the tide. Realizing he could no longer manipulate public perception, Mark's bravado crumbled. After the meeting, the townspeople surrounded Thomas, showering him with praise and support. Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You've done something incredible, Thomas. You turned your pain into strength and hope for others," she said softly. In the weeks that followed, Mark found himself ostracized, his previous charm fading under the weight of the truth. Meanwhile, Thomas's article continued to circulate, leading to a series of discussions about emotional health in the community. With the groundwork laid for support groups and workshops, Thomas felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. As summer faded into autumn, Thomas and Sarah stood hand in hand at the annual Maplewood Harvest Festival. Laughter filled the air, and the vibrant colors of the leaves mirrored the joy blooming in Thomas's heart. He had reclaimed his life, forging a path of empowerment and love. In the center of the festival, Thomas spotted Lisa, who approached with a smile. "The community has truly transformed," she said, glancing around at the engaged and happy faces, "and you played a huge part in it." Thomas nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude. "It's not just me, it's all of us coming together. We've created a space where healing can happen." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Thomas turned to Sarah. "Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I never thought I could feel this way again." She smiled brightly, leaning in closer. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Thomas. Let's continue to make a difference together." With renewed hope and love, they watched as the community thrived, knowing that together they had transformed their pain into a powerful force for good, proving that even in the face of betrayal, healing and happiness could flourish.